Hi everyone. I'm just going to wait for more people to fill in and then we can get started with the presentation today. So Catherine, someone's raised their hand. Catherine, was there something you wanted to ask? Or if it was an accident, don't worry. Can you make me admin? Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, let me see how to do that. Let me stop sharing actually for a second. Um, I think you should be panelists now. Hi, Catherine. Are you panelists now?
Yeah, that's working. That's all good.
Okay, perfect. Okay, let me reshare my screen. Okay, while I'm waiting, there's a few questions that have come up already. I'll wait for maybe 1 or 2 more minutes before people come in because I think there's quite a few of you here today. So someone said, how do you get into the UCAT mindset? Um, I think it's just maybe like going and having a look at the different types of questions. Obviously, attending this webinar is quite useful to think about what kind of format the UCAT runs in. And then once you're in year 12, sort of, I guess, closer to the time, so the summer of year 12 before you go into year 13 is usually when people start studying for it and like write the UCAT. So just doing more practice then. But yeah, I think just having a look at the material and then seeing what the questions are like will give you a good start to that. Hi, do we need microphones or camera? No microphones on or no cameras. It will just be going through a presentation and I usually, because there's a lot of you, it's quite hard to coordinate with a microphone. So I'd just say if you have an answer, type it in the chat box. And then if you have a question that you want me to address afterwards, either Catherine will look at the questions and let me know what's commonly being asked, or I can have a look at the end and answer the questions then as well. So just use the chat box and the Q&A function. Should we be able to see anything right now? Not yet. I'm just going to share my screen again. So if someone could say yes or no, if they can see the chat now, if they can see the screen now, because I'm sharing now. Yeah, microphones should be automatically switched off. Okay, perfect. How long is this conference? I think it's supposed to last an hour. It might run a bit longer than that because I'm covering both QR and AR. Okay, so I think I'm going to get started. I know there's a few more questions, but I will address them at the end. Okay, so today we're just going to be covering quantitative reasoning and abstract reasoning, and I'm just going to take you through some sample questions, question types from each of the sections, and then talk through what my top tips would be as part of this exam. So just a little bit about SixMed before I move on. So it's a company that was created by medical students for other future medical students. And in the past 6 years, we have taught over 10,000 students. The kind of events we run are like surgical webinars like today, which discusses like a variety of topics relevant for you guys who are applying to medical school. So we'll be covering things like UCAT, BMAT. We also have talks on interviews and just general medical topics like ethics and things like that that you need to know in preparation for your interviews. And then there's a few sessions on personal statement as well. And it runs throughout the year every other Sunday. And we also offer UCAT and BMAT support, so this can be one-to-one, but there's also like large group courses that you can attend, and same for the personal statement and the interview preparation as well. A little bit about me. So I'm going into my final year at the University of Bristol. So I've already done 5 years and this is my last year that I'll be going into in September. I really like teaching, which is why I took on this role. And that's kind of what I want to do alongside my career in the future. And my main interest is in the endocrinology specialty. So looking at the agenda of what we're going to cover today, so I'll just introduce you guys to QR&AR and then go through the top tips in each section. We'll do a few practice questions as well, and then do a short Q&A at the end. If there's questions that crop up that a lot of people are struggling on for a certain aspect, then Catherine can just unmute and let me know, and then I can answer the questions as we go along. So I'll try my best to answer all of your questions as well. Just general housekeeping. I think your mics are muted already, just to avoid any disruptions. I try to make the sessions as interactive as possible. So if you do have any questions, or if you're answering a question that I've got up on the screen, just make sure you're using the chat function and try and post questions during the session, during the Q&A, using the Q&A function if you want to ask anything. So just to start off, and this is also just to check that everyone can use the chat. Actually, I might actually double check if you guys can actually use the chat. There we go. Yeah, I don't think you can use it yet, but you should be able to now. So if everyone could just put in the chat box, so on a scale of 1 to 4, how confident do you feel about QR&AR? So not confident at all is 1, and then extremely confident is 4. So where are you guys along that scale? Yeah, I've just enabled the chat now, so hopefully you guys can answer that. Try and use the chat box rather than the Q&A, just so I don't have to keep clearing the Q&A box. Okay, so most people are doing, okay, saying 1 or 2s. There's a few people who are saying 3, 3.5, or 4. Okay, great. So there's some people who are not really confident, some people who are really confident. So I have got a mixture of questions for you guys to practice and just get a better idea of how the questions, the format of those questions actually are. So the main aims is just to understand the types of QR&AR questions that you might get in your UCAT and then practice them as a group. So starting off with quantitative reasoning. So essentially this is your math section. So they'll ask you to solve lots of different calculations, and it's usually at the level of GCSE maths. The hardest questions amongst quantitative reasoning are the tax questions, which takes a bit longer to learn compared to the other ones. But there are some tips and tricks that you can use to make your QR section easier, so you can bag as many marks as possible. So so there's 36 questions in total in the quantitative reasoning section, which you need to complete in 24 minutes. So approximately you have 45 seconds per question. Obviously, that's going to be different for each person. So some people are going to find certain topics a lot easier than others. So you're obviously not going to be spending the full 45 seconds on that question, whereas other people will find the question that you find easy a bit more difficult. So they'll be spending more time on it. So it can be slightly subjective as well. But just as a general rule, try and stick with that 45 seconds when you first start. There's a few key formula to remember because you won't be given this information in your UCAT. So normally conversions, the one conversion that they do expect you to remember is 1 mile is equal to 1.6 kilometers, or I easily remember it as 5 miles is 8 kilometers, and then you can work out the ratios based off of that. Other conversions like weight, kilograms to pounds, or those kind of conversions, or dollars to pounds, they will give you that conversion rate because obviously it's impossible to remember those kind of things. So that information will be given to you, but miles to kilometers, they do expect you to know that one. And the other things that's probably good to remember, they can have a lot of speed, distance, time questions. Particularly, they'll say stuff like they've traveled a certain distance in this time, and then they might ask you to work out how much fuel it has cost them per mile and things like that. So it's just really important to have just remember the speed equals distance divided by time, or however you remember it, using that triangle if you remember from physics for speed, distance, and time. The other one that a lot of people struggle with is probability. So probability comes up in both quantitative reasoning and in your decision-making section. So the AND rule is when you multiply the events together, and the OR rule is when you add the events together. So for example, if they ask you a question like, what is the probability of someone rolling a dice where they roll 2 and 6 and 8, obviously you're going to multiply the chances of that. But if they say, what is the probability of them rolling a dice and getting 2 or 7, well, 2 or 4 or 5, then you would add those events together. So that's the difference. And then the other thing to remember is your percentage change and percentage increase, percentage decrease. So percentage increase, decrease are relatively straightforward. Percentage change, some people tend to forget the formulae. So it's essentially the new number minus the old original number divided by the original number times by 100. So that's just some key formula to remember. If you want to take a screenshot of this slide, I'm more than happy to sort of leave it on there for a few seconds, and I can also check the Q&A. Oh, sorry, someone said I can't really hear anything. Is everyone else having problems hearing what I'm saying as well? Just say yes or no, just so I know, because if it's a problem on my end, I probably
your microphone sounds fine. I can hear you fine.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine then. Okay, so the person who said that, maybe if you want to just double check if your volume's high enough, or if you want to just leave and then come back and see if that works. Okay, fine. Going on to the next slide. So the way I approach quantitative reasoning, because I'll admit this was one of the harder sections for me to get used to, it's really important to use your whiteboard. I know they say a lot of this for a lot of the other sections, but particularly for quantitative reasoning. And the reason why I say that is they might give you a stem of a certain question, and they may ask you 4 or 5 questions based off of the same information. So just writing the information down from a previous answer can actually help you in the next answer as well. So just really using your whiteboard wisely, and practicing mental maths. Now, I have put this on here, but I say take that with a pinch of salt. And the reason why I say that is because when you're under stress and like time pressured conditions, mental maths may not always be accurate, or you might be doubting yourself. So I would also say there's lots of calculator functions. So if you go on the UCAT website, they have sort of shortcuts of how to use the calculator using your keyboard, just so you can get to the answers a lot faster. So definitely have a look at that. So that's on the UCAT official website, and it will just make your life a lot easier when you're working stuff out. And you can also, because it's a very simple calculator, some people think that it doesn't have a lot of functions, but actually it can sort of remember your answer from a previous question and then to work out the next answer. So just make sure you look through how to do that, and get used to doing that in your mocks and your practice questions as well. So I've got some practice questions here, and there'll be approximately like 45 seconds a question. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a timer on. It might feel a lot harder to do at the start, especially if you haven't come across UCAT before, UCAT QR questions before. but it's just to give you an idea of how much you should be spending on each question, and then we can discuss the answer afterwards. So the first question so this is the first set. So it says, a small entertainment store is having its end of year annual review of sales of DVD and Blu-ray stock. The graph below shows the number of units of DVD and Blu-ray stock sold each month in 2014. Question 1, approximately how many DVD and Blu-ray units were sold over the year? Choose the closest figure. So I'll give you guys 45 seconds. I've got a timer on to answer the question. So just put your answers down in the chat. Okay, 10 seconds left. So if more people can try and get their answers in. Okay, so that's the time. We've got a few answers down. So a lot of people saying D, and then with a few people saying E. Okay, so there's a bit of a mixture. So the answer in this situation is E, 8,500. So I think a few people did say that. So of the people who said it, can someone type in the chat why you think it's E over the other answers? And what sort of technique you might have used? Yeah, perfect. So someone said rounding and then adding them up and working it by estimation. Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly how I would do it. So you're looking at this question in general, there are so many numbers involved. So sitting there and literally calculating every single thing is going to take you ages, because what they want to do is over this year they want you to just calculate everything, but the question clearly says approximately, not exact figures. So as a result, you just round up or round down based on how many units were sold, and then add them together, which gives you roughly an average of 8,500. And that's exactly how I would do as well. So 473, would it be rounded to 500? Yes, yeah, that's how I would round it as well. Okay, moving on to the next question. So it's the same STEM, but this time they're asking you, in the final quarter of the year, how many more DVD units were sold compared with Blu-ray units? What do we think? So I'll give you guys another 45 seconds. So 10 seconds left, if you guys can get your answers in. Okay, and that's time. Right, let's have a look. Right, so most people saying A, which is really good. So the answer is A. So I think who was it? Someone, a few people have put C instead, and I can understand why they've made the mistake of C. And I think you might have read the question wrong, because the quarter, when I first looked at this question, I sort of nearly tripped up as well. But so a quarter would be, so a quarter would involve 3 months. So the first quarter would be January, February, March. The second quarter is April, May, June. The third quarter is July, August, September, and then the fourth quarter is October, November, December. So I think what might have happened with you guys who put down C, possibly, you've included September as well. So they specifically want to do in the last quarter, so October, November, and December. So that's what a quarter involves. But it's a very easy mistake to make. And then the way you would do this question is they're asking you how many more DVD units were sold compared to Blu-ray units. So you would just add, this time they're asking you an exact number, not an approximation. So you would look at the number of DVDs, and then you would subtract it from the number of the Blu-ray units, and that should give you an answer of 335. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah, great. Thank you for those who answered. Perfect. We'll move on to the next one now. The next one says, in December, what is the percentage increase of DVD unit sales compared to Blu-ray unit sales? So another 45 seconds starting from now. So try and remember your percentage increase formula, because that's what's going to help with this question. So 15 more seconds for the people who are still working things out. You guys are doing really well so far. Okay, that's time. So let's have a look. So most people have said B, which is really good. So B is the correct answer. So it's 52%. So the way you would work this one out is you're looking at December. So DVD is 628 sales, and then Blu-ray units are 413 sales. So the way to work out this answer for the people who are still maybe not sure how to do this is you do 628 minus 413, because you want to see the difference in sales between the two. And then, as I said, you always divide by the original number, the amount of Blu-ray unit sales. So you're doing, so 628 minus 413 equals 215. Then you do 215 divided by the number of Blu-ray unit sales, so 413, which gives you 0.5205, etc., etc., and then multiply it by 100 to get your percentage, which gives you 52.05%, or if you round it down, 52%. So that's why B is the correct answer. Okay, so that was relatively straightforward. Why would you consider Blu-rays to be the original in this case? So it's because of the way the question is worded. So it says, what's the percentage increase of DVD unit sales compared to Blu-ray unit sales? So when you're doing it as a division number, in that situation, you would put the DVD unit sales over the Blu-ray unit sales. It's the way the question is worded and what they're trying to ask you to compare it to. Does that make more sense? Who was it? Christian, does that make more sense? Perfect. Okay. Next one, so still the same STEM, but different question. So in January and February, a third product was also sold, the USB drives. 77 units were sold over these 2 months. What fraction approximately of total sales of the 3 products were USB drivers for January and February? So I'll put my timer on again for 45 seconds. I think this one is a few more steps compared to the previous questions. Okay, that's time. What have people got so far? Okay, unanimously people are saying E. There's one person saying C. Okay, and another one saying C as well. So the correct answer was C in this situation. So to the 2 people who said C, I think either Shrestha or Shamiha or Duran, if one of you could just explain why C over the other ones and how you worked it out, just type it in the chat if you need to. There are a few steps to this question. Yeah, so you work out the total for January and February. So we know that 77 units were sold, 77 units of the USB drives were sold over January and February. They're asking you of all three products, the USB drives, the DVD, and the Blu-ray, what is the fraction of USB drives sold? So you need to work out the overall total of sales of all three of these units in January and February. So you're working out 320 plus 230 plus 473 plus 300 plus the 77 units, which I think gives you 1373 if I remember correctly. So let me just quickly work it out. Plus 473, so 1323 even. So 1323 is the total number of units that you have. Of that, they want to know how many of them were USB drives. So I would do 77 divided by 1323, which gives me about 0.058. But converting that to a fraction, that would give me 2 over 36, which is C. Does that make sense to people? Perfect. Someone else has said that as well. How do you get 1323? I got 1,400. Oh, sorry. I think I might have not added. I didn't add the 77 units of the USB drives as well. Sorry, that's my fault. You would have to add the 77 units as well. Does that make sense to everyone? Sorry, that was an error in my calculation. Yeah, exactly. Sorry, I'm just having a look at all the other comments, but Shrestha, yeah, I agree with that. Okay, moving on. So this is a different type of question. Oh, we've got more comments. Hang on. Okay, perfect. Moving on to the next set. So you've got a kickboxing team this time, and they were required to check the weights of their entrants before a competition. So you've got the students in the table, and then you've got the different weights as well in stones and pounds. And in this type of question, they will give you the conversion. So they've said 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds, and 1 stone is 14 pounds, just to help you convert between the 3 different units. So the first question is saying, in pounds, how much did James weigh? So I'll give you guys 45 seconds again. Okay, most people have already answered, which is great. And just wait for a few more. Okay, so most people saying unanimously D. I'll stop the timer there then. So yes, the correct answer was D. It's 133 pounds. So this one is a relatively easy one to calculate. So we've got James, who's 9 stones and 7 pounds. So all you need to be doing is converting everything into pounds. So we already know that he's 7 pounds. All we need to work out is the 9 stones into pounds. And we know that 1 stone is equal to 14 pounds. So what you would have to do is 9 stones times by 14. To get the remaining in pounds, and then add the 7 pounds, which gives you 133. Is everyone happy with that question? Okay, perfect. Okay, different question now. In stones and pounds, how much does Tom weigh? Sorry, I think that's a typo there. So 45 seconds again. Okay, 10 seconds left for the people still thinking about what to put down as their answer. Just be aware of your decimals and stuff in this question. Okay. So we've got a mixture of C's and B's, which is what I thought would happen. So the answer in this situation is B. And so I'll go through the steps of how to work out this question. And I think, Duran, you've asked whether you round up, whether you round up or round down. I think someone else has asked that as well. So let me go through this one. So again, this is a conversions question, basically. So they've asked you in stones and pounds, how much does Tom weigh? So we know that Tom weighs 84 kilograms, and we know that 1 kilogram is 2.2 pounds. So the first thing I do is 84 multiplied by 2.2 pounds to get my overall weight in pounds, which gives me 184.8 pounds so far. We now then have to convert pounds into stones. So I do 184.8 pounds divided by 14 pounds, because remember, we're going backwards to get into stones, which gives me 13.2 stones. So I can see why some people have put the answer as C, but remember that just because it's 0.2, that doesn't mean it's 2 pounds. So you need to convert that 0.2 into pounds now, because you have all of your answer in stones. So you've got 13 stones, which you can leave separately. And what you need to do is do the 0.2 and you need to multiply it by 14, which gives you 13 stone and 2.8 pounds. So I would round up and I would say 13 stones and 3 pounds, which is why the answer is B. Does that make sense to everyone? There's a few steps, so hopefully that made sense. If not, I'm happy to go over it again. Yeah, perfect. So with weight, especially if it's 2.8, you would round up. So that's why it would be 13 stones and 3 pounds. Okay, next one. What is the total weight of all the boys in kilograms? Now, this is where the answers from your previous questions can actually come in handy. So if you've been writing it down, that can help. So I'll give you guys 45 seconds. Again. Okay, 10 seconds for anyone else who still wants to put their answer down. Okay, and that's time. So most people have put down C. I've seen a few E's, a few D's as well, but most people are agreeing with C, which is the correct answer. So it's asking you all of their weights in kilograms. So we know that Tom, Chris, and Josh, all of their weights are already in kilograms. So you could just put that to one side. So you could add them and put them to one side, which should give you 256 kilograms. What you need to work out is what John and James's weight are. If we go back, let me just double check if somebody else is. Oh no, I don't think so. So I thought the other ones can help, but maybe not. So what you would need to work, so the answer was C. So what you would need to work out then is convert basically 9 stones and 7 pounds and then 10 stones and 9 pounds back into kilograms. So to work James's out, so I'm just going to go over one because the other one would be the same sort of technique. So for 9 stones and 7 pounds for James, we need to convert that stones. I'd convert all of it into pounds. So I do 9 stone times by 14. Which we did as 126, and then we added 7 for the first question, which gave me 133 pounds. We then want to convert that 133 pounds into kilograms, so I'm just going to divide by 2.2, which gives me 60.45 kilos. And then you do the same for John, and when you add all of the kilograms up, it should give you an answer of 384 kilograms. Does that make sense to everyone? I know a few people put down, what was the answer? Some people put down D, which was 390, and then someone else put down E, I think, which is 420. Does that make more sense how I did that? So I wouldn't round up immediately after you've calculated James and John's separately. I would round up at the end when you've added all of the kilograms, which might have caused the error for some of you. hopefully that helps. Just say yes or no in the chat. Okay, great. And then I think the last one in this set, as a percentage, how much heavier is Chris compared to the average of the 5 boys? So again, the previous question the previous answers or working outs can help with this question. So I'll give you guys 40 seconds, 45 seconds even. Ten seconds left for anyone else who wants to put down an answer. Okay, and that's time. So let's see what most people have said. So unanimously, it seems like the answer is B, which is correct. So it's 30%. So what you can actually do is use the answer from your previous question. So we know that the total weight of all of the boys is 384 kilograms. This is asking you, first of all, try and work out the average. So what I would do is 384 divided by the 5 boys. Which gives me 76.8. So that's the average. And then what you need to do is work out Chris's. So you need to know the percentage difference between Chris's weight compared to the average of the 5 boys. So we know Chris is 100 kilos. So we can do 100 minus 76.8. And then if you multiply that by, oh no, actually, hang on. If you, so if you do 100 minus 76.8, or the number that I got, and then divide it by 76.8 times by 100, that should give you B, 30%. Does that make sense to everyone? Again, just say yes or no in the chat. Yeah, it should give you something like 31.2% or something like that. So when you round it down, the closest answer is B. Okay, someone's asked, will the answers from the previous question in the set always be needed in the next question? So we should write down our working out. Not necessarily. In this situation, for this clinical STEM, yes. But they won't always relate to each other. I just think in general, it's a good idea to write your working out anyway, because it helps you not make mistakes and helps you round down or round up correctly. That's just my way of working. But if you find that you can do the things in your head and you find that a lot faster, obviously feel free to do that. But in this situation, it did help, obviously, knowing the total weight in kilograms of the others, so that you would actually be spending less time on this question when you're doing the calculation. So it's really personal preference, and you can have a look through these UCAT questions and see what works well for you. But for me, writing it down really does help. But it may not always be the case in every single question. Okay, moving on to the next set, we've got Derek, who's looking to book a holiday to America. He's saved 4,570 for his trip. Given that $1 is worth 69 pence, calculate how many dollars Derek will have for his trip. So 45 seconds for this question. Okay, so let's have a look at what people have said. So most people have said C, which is the correct answer. So this is a relatively simple question. So we've got $4,570 and the conversion rate is $1 is equal to 69 pence. So the way you'd work this out is, to get this into dollars, you just need to do 4,570 divided by 0.69, which gives you 6,623.1888. So then you can just round it up to $6,623.19. Okay, moving on to next. This is a different question. So I just wanted to put in a probability question because this is something that a lot of people struggle with. So Tony has a big bag of sweets, 50 are blue, 30 are red, and 20 are green. Assuming that the probability that he pulls any particular sweet out is the same, so is equal, calculate the probability that he pulls out a red sweet. So what do we think? So I'll give you guys 45 seconds again. I think this is relatively straightforward as well, so it shouldn't take you the whole 45 seconds. Okay, let's have a look. I think most people have answered. So most people unanimously saying C, so well done. So the way to do this is sort of work out the overall, the total basically. So you're adding 50 plus 30 plus 20, so you're getting 100 sweets in total. And they're trying to ask you what is the chance of you picking out a red sweet. So that's obviously going to be 30 over 100, and if you simplify that, that is 3/10. So relatively straightforward question. So those are the different types of questions you can get. I wasn't able to find a tax question last minute, so I haven't added that, but please have a look at that in your own time as well. So the top tips I can give for quantitative reasoning from my experience is if a question asks for sort of approximate values, make sure you're rounding up or rounding down to the nearest 100, or depending on the numbers you have, just make sure you round as appropriate. Use your calculator, and when you go on the UCAT website, as I said before, there's lots of shortcuts which you can look into, and just be confident in your answers. Sort of don't doubt yourself, and if you are worried, just make sure you get really good at using the calculator so you don't have to rely on your mental maths as well if you don't feel too confident in that time pressure. I'm just going to look at a few questions in case anything did come up before I move on. Are the exemplars a bit easier to the normal questions? I'm not too sure. So there are some of these questions have been taken just from the UCAT book that we use. They can be a little bit more difficult, like the tax questions, which haven't been included. So that's why I said sort of have a look at it through your own time. I haven't got any specific compound interest questions. So I can't go through them at the moment, but I'll see if I can find anything at the end if we have time. Venn diagrams don't come up in QR. They are under decision making, so they'll probably be covered in a different in a different 6med session. Are there any UCAT books you'd suggest? So me personally didn't use any books. I just used Medify, MedEntry, and then the 6med, the UCAT Ninja. So those were my resources. I usually stuck with MedEntry and the 6med UCAT Ninja, and then I switched in the last few weeks before my exam to Medify, and I'd recommend doing that, or switching to a different sort of exam question bank, because it sort of exposes you to questions you might not have seen before, or styles of questions that you might not have seen before. That's why I think using multiple question banks is useful. But the UCAT books, I think they're when I was doing it, which was, bear in mind, it was in 2017, so like 6 years ago, I used I think you can use the 500 UCAT questions or whatever, that book that's on Amazon. I sort of borrowed it from the library. I used that one. But I do think the questions on the question banks online are a lot harder than in that book. So I think I would just stick to the question banks, and also it gets you used to using the computer as well. So hopefully that's useful. Are Medify mock scores accurate, or did they give you a false sense of security? I found Medify easier than MedEntry, I'll be honest, but some people say the opposite. I definitely think MedEntry sort of reflects your actual UCAT exam, and the UCAT Ninja that 6med offers, both of those reflect your UCAT a lot better than Medify. I think Medify papers are easier in general. our Medify, I think MedEntry is harder than the real UCAT, which is why I encourage people to use it, because it prepares you for the worst. So I think that's better. I'm going to leave the other questions until the end because they seem to be just general. Oh, hang on. So there's what's a top tip for conversion rates and commission? So for conversion rates, they're relatively straightforward. So I always sort of write them out as ratios. So for example, actually, if I go back to the previous question, I think it's a good question that you asked, actually, so I want to spend some time on it. So for this question, I know it's relatively straightforward, but if I just, I'm trying to see if I can annotate. Yeah, so if you just have sort of, I usually write it out as sort of like $1 is equal to so 69 pence. So sorry, I'm really sorry about my writing. It's not the greatest on trying to do this on a computer. If you need to then convert pounds to dollars, I would just put I usually do it as like ratios because that's just how my brain works. So it's a lot easier for me to sort of understand it this way. So I have 4,570, and then I just sort of put like an arrow. You might have used this technique for GCSE maths and stuff. So to get from 4,500 to get to the dollars, you just need to work out like what you need to multiply by or what you need to divide by. So that's how I work it out. So then I know I need to divide 4,570 by 0.69, and then I need to multiply the $1 by that, basically, and that's how I work out the answer as 6623. But obviously some people have different sort of easier methods or other methods that work for them, but that's the way that sort of helps me. So you can use your own technique as well. So okay, fine. Okay. So moving on, I'll address all the other comments later. So abstract reasoning, what is it? So it's just your ability to recognize patterns and be able to put down an answer really quickly. This is probably one of the most time pressured UCAT sections, which some of you might have found if you've already done the UCAT or if you're 2 weeks before doing it. So you have 50 questions and you need to do it in 12 minutes. So you have approximately 14 seconds per question. And the types of questions are different as well. So you can get type 1 and type 4 questions, which are relatively similar. So type 1 is where you get two sets of different shapes, so set A and set B, and then you're given a question to ask, which is asking you whether it fits into set A's pattern, set B's pattern, or neither. And then type 4 is similar. So again, you're presented with two shapes, A or B, and then you're asked which of the four responses, which of your four answer options relates to either A or B. So they relatively are similar. And then types 2 and 3 are usually grouped together with my revision. So type 2, you get a series of different shapes, and then you're presented with multiple answer options, and you have to identify the next shape in the sequence. So you get basically a sequence. Whereas type 3 is you get sort of a statement about a group of shapes. I will show you all of these types, by the way, and you're asked to determine which shape will basically complete that shape next. So it might be a little bit confusing the way I've explained it, but I will show you each of the types. Before we do that, just talking about common patterns, I tend to use the SCANS acronym. Some people use SSSPN, whichever works for you, or some people use NSPCC, whichever acronym you can easily remember in an exam, that is the one I would go with. They all sort of essentially mean the same thing. It's just the letters are in a weird order. So what does SCANS actually mean? So these patterns commonly come up in your abstract reasoning. So knowing what to look for even before you're presented with a question can really help with trying to identify those patterns quicker. So S stands for shape or shading. So shape is in set A, are there a certain number of circles? And then in set B, are there only squares? That kind of thing. Shading is there some sort of pattern with whether a shape is shaded black or white or gray, or if there's a pattern through it. Color, obviously, again, similar to shading. Angle and arrangement is basically, sometimes the type of pattern they can have is in set A, they may only have acute angles. In set B, they may only have obtuse angles or right angles. So just making sure to have a look to see whether that's the pattern. Number is a bit complicated. So number can be number of shapes. It could be number of sides. So is it an odd number of sides or an even number of sides? It could be the number of angles. It could be the number of shaded shapes. So it basically envelopes the other ones as well. I forgot to talk about arrangement. Arrangement basically is another word for position. So sometimes the pattern is rotation. So you might have in set A clockwise rotation of the objects or the shapes. And then in set B, you might have anti-clockwise rotation of the shapes. So that could be another pattern as well. And then size. So size is always relative to something else in that box. So you might always have a big four-sided shape next to a small circle. And then in set B, you might always have a massive circle next to a small quadrilateral shape. So that's the size is always relative to whatever else is in that box as well. Just bearing that in mind. So we're going to do some practice questions in each of the types. It's going to be difficult because I am going to stick to the 14 seconds timer. So if you're really struggling to answer these questions, don't worry, because this is probably the first time you've seen these patterns before. So putting it into practice and trying to remember all of the steps of scans can be difficult, but try your best. So type 1 question looks a bit like this. So you've got set A and set B, and then there's got this. Actually, no, let's not do it under time conditions because there's multiple questions. So I'm just going to point with my cursor and I'm just going to ask you guys to type in the chat what you think it is. So for this question, what do you think the answer is? And if anyone has figured out the pattern as well, feel free to put that in the chat box as well. Okay, so you've got lots of answers coming in. So we've got lots of people saying A, good. And a few people have talked about the pattern as well. So set A only has curved sides and set B has no curved sides. Good, so that was really good that you guys picked up on that one. And what about this one here? Great, most people saying neither, really good. What about this one? Okay, most people saying B, good, because it has only straight sides, so it has to fit in with set B. And then the last one here, which one does that fit into? A, great, good. So perfect. So that one's A, C, B, and neither. So all of you got this right. So the pattern in this is relatively straightforward. So this is all curved edges, and then this is all straight edges. So obviously with this one, which has both curved and straight edges, it would have to fit into neither. Okay, moving on to type 2 questions. So type 2 is where you get sort of 4 different things. It's sort of something is happening with each of these tiles, and what they're trying to ask you to do is figure out what's going to be the next pattern. Is it A, B, C, or D? So type your answers in, and then we can discuss what the pattern is. Okay, most people saying C, sorry. One person said B as well, or 2 people have said B. Let's have a look. So the answer is C, so well done to most of you. So it's essentially looking at what's changing with each of these. So I would always, because there's so much going on, I would always start off with one shape first. So I'm going to start off with this top black square here. Moving into the next shape, what's happening to it is it's moved to the bottom, then it stayed in the bottom, and then it's gone back up to the top. So the next shape, the black square needs to be at the top. So that immediately rules out option A and option B. So it can only be C or D. Then to figure out which one it is between the two, I'm going to fixate on a different object. So I'm going to look at the circle. So the circle starts here, and then it moves clockwise to the top. Then it moves clockwise further to the right, and then it moves clockwise to the bottom again. So the white circle has to next be in the left there. So that's what makes me think of C. Does that make sense to everyone? Perfect. So someone said, how do you know the black square stays at the top? Because that's what the pattern is. So we've got it staying at the top, and then it goes down, and then it goes down, and then it goes to the top again. So it must be at the top again. So if you are struggling with that one, you can just pick a different thing. So you can pick the black circle instead, which is going clockwise again to the top. And that can also help you rule it out if you're really struggling. Okay, type 3. So type 3, so the way it runs is sort of, it says this is to this as this is to this. So what you need to try and figure out is the changes from this tile to this tile and apply it to this one and see which of these match the changes to this one. So see if you guys can figure this out. And type your answers in the chat. Okay, unanimously people are saying C, which is a good sign. So the answer is C. So again, I'd start off with one thing because obviously there's too much going on in the tiles. So I'd start off with sort of maybe the outer black double-layered circle, and what's happened to that is it's moved to the inside. So what's going to happen to this large square is it's probably going to move to the inside. So that went from sort of shaded to non-shaded, whereas this one is going to go from non-shaded to shaded, which is why we have that inner black square. So we can sort of think between B and C being the possible answer, but I think C fits it better. Then you can also have a look at these inner shapes here. So I'll start off by looking at the black circle, which then moves to the outer edge. So the black triangle is also going to move to the outer edge. So it's either going to be C or it's going to be D again. But obviously we know that we can't have a triangle in the center. It has to be a square, which is why C is the correct answer. Okay, great. And the last type, one thing I forgot to say, which I just remembered while I was talking to you guys, when you get a type 1 question, always, when you're trying to find the pattern, always start with the simplest box, because it will help you find that pattern the fastest. So with this one, all we can see is a oval. So it must be something to do with either the shape or the number of sides or the type of side. And then once you look at it, you know that every other tile has curved edges. Again, if you were looking at set B, my simplest tile would probably be this one, and all I can see is straight edges. So that just helps you sort of figure out the pattern as fast as possible. Always start with the simplest tile in the set. Okay, type 4. So type 4, again, you get set A and set B, and it's asking you which of the shape belongs to set A. So first of all, try and figure out the pattern, and then try and figure out which could be the answer. And if you have figured out the pattern as well, try and type that in the chat. Okay, Tanisha said D. Anyone else agree or disagree with her? And why? What do you think the pattern is? Okay, Millie's saying A. Anyone else saying A? Christian's also saying A. And for the people who put your answers down, why do you think A or why do you think D? Okay, so Duren, you've said A and you're saying we're facing in the southeast direction, depending on the color. So what it will be on the top right. Okay, great. Everyone else agree with that pattern, or someone else spotted something else? So the answer is A, so well done to people who said that. But for other people, did you agree or disagree with the pattern? Just say, yes, I'd agreed or whatever. Perfect. Okay, so there are a few things going on here. And whenever you see some sort of, I guess, positional pattern, you know that it's going to be a rotation or an arrangement pattern. So whenever you see something uniform, you can always sort of think, okay, I need to have rotation in the back of my mind, or the position. So that's how I would do the question as well. So as Darren has said, when you're facing sort of, I guess, southeast, or you can sort of think of it in that direction, then the arrows on the top right, oh, hang on, on the top right even here. And then if it's not, it's on the top left. Is that what you mean, Darren? Yeah, perfect. Okay, whereas it'll be the opposite for set B. Okay. So for top tips for abstract reasoning, it's hard because of the 14 seconds time limit that you have. So it's really important to try and be quick with your pattern recognition. And the way you can get better at that is with more and more practice, because the more you see those patterns, the easier it will be for you to identify them in the future. Use your instincts as well. So usually the answer you put down first is the right answer. People then go on and change the answer afterwards. So just try and make sure that you sort of get really good at that initial pattern recognition. Especially if you're getting like multiple questions using the same set, make sure you take your time in that first question to identify your pattern before you answer the rest of the question, so that you don't get 5 in a row wrong. And then if you're really stuck, just make sure you put down an answer anyway, the one you think is the most correct, and flag it and move on and come back to it when you do have time. But always make sure you take a guess. Don't just leave that answer option blank. So that was the end of my presentation. So on a scale of 1 to 4, how confident do you guys feel about quantitative reasoning and abstract reasoning now? Um, 3. Okay, great. So do you have any recommendations on where to source questions segregated and assessed by topic area in maths? I think on a few of the question banks that you can get, like UCAT Ninja and MedEntry, they do have like a practice section, or like a learn section, where they can talk you through some formulae and like different types of maths questions. So it might be worth looking there. Otherwise, most of the stuff that they try and test you on is GCSE level, so you can have a look at that information as well. Is there a list of all the things we need to know for quantitative reasoning? Again, as Christian said, either in Medify or MedEntry or any of the other question banks, as I said, they have a learn section of all the types of things you could get asked about. So it might be worth having a look at that. Okay, so I'm just going to open the floor to questions. I think I'll just leave it on that slide, because I think there's quite a few. What's the top tip for conversion rates? I think I just went over that one already. My friend says UCAT Ninja isn't similar at all to actual UCAT questions. What do you think? Well, when I was revising, I used both. I don't know how much it's changed now, but for me, I found UCAT Ninja and MedEntry really useful, and then I switched to Medify now and then. So that worked for me. I think it is really personal preference. Oh, and then what's a good place to be with mock scores currently? What do you mean by currently? Is it how many weeks are you before your exam? It is all dependent on that, obviously. Can you go back to the scan slide? Yeah, of course. Let me just try and find the scan slides. Just 1 second, bear with me. Okay, I'm going to reshare. Yeah, so there's a slide. Okay. Should I be worried about getting a bad score in a mock, but in the previous ones you've done decently? I've done one that before this in 2,450 band 4, and it deflated me a bit. Okay, well, sometimes you can have a bad day, or it can be an extremely hard paper, which is, I can understand that it could have sort of made you a bit upset and sort of set you back a little bit in that way. It could also be that you're burnt out, or maybe you're doing too many questions, which has meant that when you were doing that particular mock, you weren't focusing properly, so you were just getting a lot of questions wrong, which is completely fair enough, because it does take a lot of time and effort to study for the UCAT. So I think that might have been one of the reasons. I think maybe take a break, make sure you review those questions properly to see where you went wrong. And if you think, oh, I definitely would have gotten that right if I was in a different mindset, then obviously it's not the end of the world. But if it's something that you really don't understand why you went wrong, make sure you compare it to your previous mocks to see how difficult the questions were, because that could have also had an impact on your scores. So if it's a one-off, I don't think it's something you need to worry about too much. Just make sure you continue doing mocks, but continue having breaks and proper schedules as well, so you're not burning out before your exam. 2.5 weeks before an exam. So 2.5 weeks before an exam, I'd probably say it depends on what you're aiming for and what kind of universities you want to go for. I can't give you sort of a definitive mark, but roughly sort of getting in the high 670s, 80s, something like that, to the 700s is probably a good marker. But again, that depends on the universities you're applying to, because some of the universities don't really look at the UCAT at all, and some of them do. So it depends on your personal circumstance as well. Yes, I'll come back to the last one. So how accurate is med-entry quantitative reasoning to the real thing? I think it is quite accurate. They do have quite some really difficult questions on there. But again, some people find med-entry easier than others. So I think it's worth trying them out. Some of the websites also have like sample questions that you can do. So you could maybe have a look at those and then see which format suits you best, and go from there. How long did you take to revise for the exam? So I booked my exam for the 31st of August, and I spent sort of mid-July all the way up to the end of August. So it took me about 6 weeks. And I would say 6 weeks is sort of a good middle, because it can really help you sort of try and understand where you're going wrong. So the first 3 weeks I usually focused on just making sure I understood all the questions and reviewed everything, and then the last 3 weeks I sort of just did quite a lot of mocks and getting into the exam mindset. So 6 weeks for me, but some people take longer, some people take less time. What score should I get 10 days before my exam when I'm aiming for minimum 700 plus? I can't say exactly. So I think it's just individual scores. If you're aiming for minimum 700 plus, you should be hitting that for 10 days before, and you should be be consistent, but sometimes it can fluctuate up and down, and that's completely normal. Are you a graduate medical student? I'm not. I'm just in my final year, so but I did undergrad medicine. Some examples of political decisions that affect. Okay, I don't know why that's in there, but yeah, if it's useful for other people, that's fine. How to improve on decision making. I think decision making has the most versatile types of questions that you could be asked about. I think it's just making sure to cover all of the different types of questions, so the Venn diagrams, the syllogisms, the logic puzzles, just spending time on each of them, and maybe going through the practice part of your question banks just to see like how they walk you through each of the questions. I think that's what can help. But the good thing about decision making is you have the most amount of time for that section, so actually taking some time and looking into those, looking into how to work out those questions is not going to cost you a lot of time for the other questions. Which universities don't look at the UCAT? I'm not sure, it changes every year, so I would advise having a look online, because every year they sort of release what percentage they look at the UCAT, what percentage they don't. Obviously I go to Bristol, so from my perspective that's the main one that I know, and they solely just look at the UCAT in Bristol, so it's 100% weighted on UCAT. Okay. How is the UCAT scores scaled up from your raw score? I'm not too sure about that. so I can't answer that question directly. If someone else can, feel free to. Okay, I have 9 days left until my exam. Should I start with mini mocks or just mocks now? Do I continue practicing and mocks after? I think you should do some mocks just to get into the mindset of actually sitting down for 2 hours and doing the entire paper. What's your advice if your UCAT doesn't go to plan? Just remember, it's not the end of the world, and you might just need to change the universities that you're applying for. You might have certain dream universities which have a really high UCAT score, and you might not meet that UCAT score. It's not the end of the world. You might just need to just think of other universities, just to say that all universities are just as good as each other, because after those 5 or 6 years, you are coming out with the same degree and you're all just treated as doctors. So rankings and stuff, they don't really matter that much. And I think you learn the same amount. So medicine is a slightly different degree to all other degrees in that regardless of which university you go to, the teaching has to be standardized because they need to produce those good F1 and F2 doctors. So at the end of the day, if you do have a bad day and you don't get the UCAT score you want for the university you want, it's not the end of the world. So just replan which universities to apply to, which don't look at your UCAT as much. Okay. How long should I be studying every day if my UCAT is in 4 weeks? That's really dependent on you. I can't tell you how many hours you need to study because it's the way you study, and it might take you a longer time to go over and review the questions you went wrong compared to someone else. So I can't give that specific time, because the last thing I want to do is say a number and then for you guys to go and revise that amount of time, but then the actual revision is not useful. So you need to try out different ways of how effectively you can revise. I have 2 weeks till my exam, but I can't seem to finish most QR questions in 45 seconds, and I only get through half the questions in the QR section in a mock. What should I do? I think you might need to sort of go and reevaluate how you're answering the questions and maybe think about which questions you're specifically spending more time on, and maybe practice those questions not under timed conditions, just to see if maybe it's your technique. If you're really, really worried, obviously, I think a week beforehand, you can still, or 2 weeks beforehand, you can still move your UCAT to a later date. And if you think that will benefit you, that's probably the way to go. How many hours a day and days in a week did you study? It varied, because some sections I found a lot harder. So I found QR and AR a lot harder than the other sections. QR and VR a lot harder than the other sections. So I would spend a lot more time. So I'd spend a couple of hours in the morning, a couple of hours in the evening for those sections, whereas I didn't need to spend as much time on the others. So again, it varies from person to person. My exam is in 2 weeks. Should I do a mock per day? Probably not a mock per day, but I would try and do maybe sort of 1 mock on Monday, 1 mock on Wednesday, and then 1 mock on Saturday, and see your progress through there. And I'd also advise doing your mocks in an environment where you can where there's a bit of background noise. So one thing I did closer to my exams, I did one of my mocks in a library, on a library computer. It, number one, gets you used to the computer, especially if you are currently using a laptop. It's not going to be the same, and it also helps you sort of get used to that background noise, which will be there in your exam, because it's not just you guys doing your UCAT exam in those test centers. Other people will be doing their driving test. People do their law exams, and people used to do their situational judgment exam there when as medical students. So there's lots of different exams going on. It's not just UCAT, so they might be a bit noisier than you guys, but you just have to get used to that background noise. So I definitely recommend trying that when you're doing one of your mock. So yeah, I've said, so the hardest section for me was probably QR, only because A level I didn't do A level maths. I did biology, chemistry, English literature, and an EPQ and physics. So I didn't do maths, so I did feel like I had to brush up on it a little bit more. So that's why that was my hardest section. VR was initially quite hard because there was just so much text and trying to get used to reading that text. And those were the reasons why those were hard for me. Will the scores for the first deciles change a lot from last year? I'm not really sure. I don't think I'm the best person to answer that question. Do all test centres provide earplugs? Again, I'm not sure. If someone else knows, feel free to answer that question. Okay, can you repeat the last AR? Let me have a look. So I think 2 people have asked that. Oh, sorry. Do keyboard shortcuts work? Because they don't for me on the official. Oh, okay. Catherine, if you want to answer that, I'm happy to. You can answer that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I was typing it, but yeah, keyboard shortcuts do work definitely in the actual exam.
Yeah, sorry. If you wanted to answer any of the questions, feel free to as well. Sorry, I feel like I just answered all of them.
I was literally just typing, so don't worry. What was your score on the UCAT? I've already said my score. I got 3,180. What did you get?
Mine was, I think, like 3,000, something like that. I can't remember. It's like so long ago. But yeah, it's only because Bristol required quite a high one.
Same as Newcastle, yeah. Newcastle's just UCAT as well. So
Yeah, and then keyboard shortcuts. I'm not sure about that one.
they definitely do work in the exam because I use shortcuts. So, but to be fair, I did sit the exam 5 years ago, so actually maybe it's changed.
That's
I
the
think
same.
they do.
Yeah, but I do think they work because like remembering the answer from your previous question and things like that. Obviously a scientific calculator does that, but knowing how to do that online is quite useful, especially if you're panicking in the moment.
Yeah. I don't know about the earplugs thing. I didn't even know test centers did provide earplugs.
I didn't think they did. I just thought you had to sort of get back used to the background noise. So that's why I went and practiced them in libraries. But I'm not sure if they actually do provide earplugs. And I did see a question earlier about whiteboards as well, like how many whiteboards you get. I think it's you can ask for as many as you want, but for some reason, some test centers, like the one I went to, I was only allowed 2. I don't know about you.
I was only allowed 1, so
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so I think it varies again from test center to test center. So it might be worth maybe calling them and asking them like how much do you actually allow, because that will help you prepare again.
yeah. Someone's asked how much do SJT scores matter for admissions. I know for Newcastle we don't look at SJT unless it's band 4.
Yeah, I think band 1, 2, or 3 is fine in most universities. I think in places like UCL, they previously, I don't know now, they looked at only people who scored band 1 and band 2, and maybe considered people for interview for band 3. So again, it varies from university to university. UCL,
A lot of these questions I think is more on the admission side because we can only really speak from Bristol and Newcastle's perspective.
yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
UCL used BMAT. It might have been a different university. Sorry about that. Are the whiteboards normal? Because I thought it's like laminated note. Yeah, well, my whiteboard, I couldn't rub out anything, which is why we were allowed to. I don't know about you, Catherine.
I could rub out everything's different. It is actually different between all test centers, I think.
Yeah, exactly. How did you improve VR scores? So for me, I think it was more about just making sure I found the right keywords, because I was just picking random words and trying to find them. But it's really important to like pick the right one so that you sort of maximize your chances of finding the right bit of text and reading it. The other thing I thought was they can easily trick you in terms of the way they write the statements. So don't just read the sentence that the keyword is in. If you need more context, read the sentence after it or before it as well, because that does help.
I think for the first decile question, with it changing a lot, I don't think we're the best people to answer, but it does fluctuate every year. It could be the same, it could be higher, it could be lower. So
Yeah.
it honestly depends on every year.
Mm-hmm. What are the other ones? Do you have any tips for decision making? I think sort of just the hardest questions in decision making for me was Venn diagrams and probability. So I actually just did quite a few like probability type questions. that we had done previously in GCSE, which sort of helped me get back into the mindset. And the same with Venn diagrams. It's just really about sort of, I'm quite a visual learner, so I just draw out everything. And same for the logic puzzles. I just draw out because a lot of the time it's like in a race, who came first or who came second. Those are what the questions are like. So I literally would just draw out sort of in a table and try and figure out who's where. So that's what worked best for me. I don't know about you, Catherine.
Yeah, no, literally exactly the same. Like drawing stuff out and visualizing it made things a lot easier for me.
Yeah.
How do you keep that fear away? I have my exam in 2 weeks and I know I'm doing all right, but I get a bit nervous sometimes. I think it's normal to get nervous. It is obviously quite a big exam. How do you keep the fear away? I think with practice and with getting more confident in yourself, I think the fear does decrease, but I don't think it ever goes away.
Yeah.
Not sure about you.
Yeah, no, I felt the same. I was extremely nervous, but I think it's more just about sort of continuing doing those mocks because that's your reassurance and continuing doing those questions. And it is a nervous exam because, you know, a lot is riding on this, so that's what it might feel like. But just obviously, if you're feeling like take a few deep breaths and things like that, that can really help because that helped me on the day because I was extremely nervous. How do you improve scanning technique? I can never find the right words. I think that someone else might have done a VR session. I'm not sure. But the techniques I used was like, you know, capital lettered names or dates are really good keywords, and things that sort of stick out in the text that you might only find in a specific paragraph. So if they're talking about like a certain, because usually they have like some texts which are like medieval, so if they have like King Arthur or King something, they're a lot easier to find those kind of words. And then numbers are very easy to find as well. So those are the kind of keywords I would pick. And always, this isn't a keyword, but the thing that helps you interpret what the answer is are like filler words like almost or never or sometimes, because that helps you determine whether it's a yes, no, or a can't tell. How can we reach out to you guys later for guidance after the session? Is that possible? Well, we run some of these like 6med sessions, but I'm not sure we can sort of like exchange contact details. I don't think we can we?
I don't think we can, but I think you can email team at 6med and I guess
Yeah.
they can forward it to us, maybe.
Yeah, and they can answer your queries as well. I'm practicing AR a lot, but not improving. I can never spot the pattern, or I spot the pattern, but there's another one I don't spot. My exams in 2 weeks. What should I do? A lot of the AR does have multiple patterns. I think if you spot one pattern and then there is still another pattern, you will still get most of the questions right. And if you're really not sure about some of the tiles, you can always flag and come back. It is difficult because it is so time pressured. But for you, it might be worth sort of maybe in the morning doing them untimed just to try and find the pattern, and then in the evening doing them timed and trying to make sure that you're still working under that time pressure and still able to spot those patterns. I think that's what you need to sort of train yourself to do. That's my advice. I don't know, Catherine, if you have anything else.
I agree. I think your advice is good.
And yeah, scans. So if you really can't see a pattern, just go systematically through scans. So think, is there a shape pattern? Is it a color? Is it arrangement? Just go through it systematically. It will take time initially, but the more you do it, the faster you will get at it. Okay. I find VR so hard with all the blocks of text. How do you tackle VR questions? Sometimes when you've got your keywords, it's quite difficult to sort of, I guess, scan through the text, because what I find when I read from left to right, I just end up reading the whole sentence. So for me, what worked really well is sort of reading diagonally. So like choosing the bottom part of the text and actually scanning in a zigzag way or in a diagonal way, because then you're looking for the word rather than reading the entire sentence. That worked quite well for me. And then how would you do the VR questions where they ask what the entire passage is about? Oh, I'm not so sure. Do you know, Catherine?
Those questions, to be honest, because there's normally quite a small number of them in it, I would tend to just flag and skip them and come back to them at the end when I have more time, because they do take a bit long. You need the whole passage.
Yeah, I think so. And then will universities ever say that SJT band one is the only band required? I don't think so. Because a lot of the time they don't really look at it. They look at the overall score and then they look at other aspects of your application as well. And a lot of universities will say on their website that they don't look at the bands at all.
Yeah, I don't know a single uni that just wants band one. So
Yeah. What band did you get for SJT? I got band one. Catherine.
I also got a band one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but I think band one and band two are pretty good, in general. What score roughly do you think you need as a minimum for Bristol and Newcastle? I think it varies year on year. I think Bristol last year was, I don't quote me on this, I think just better off looking at their website. It was like 2,800, 2,900. It's quite high. What about Newcastle?
Newcastle's last year was, I think it was 2,850, I think.
Yeah. So it's something
It was
along the lines,
quite
yeah.
high last year.
Mm.
Yeah, it was quite high.
But they do like change it depending on how the overall cohort have done every year. So that's why I can't like say exactly what score it can be. And then when should you revise for the BMAT? So I actually didn't do the BMAT, so I can't give any advice on that. But Catherine?
I also did not do the BMAT, unfortunately,
Okay,
but I think they run
yes.
BMAT surgery sessions. So
Mm. So I think, yeah, theoretically, I would probably focus on UCAT over the summer and then BMAT September, October, because that's when the timings are, aren't they, for the exams?
yeah.
Uh, And then how do you do well in the SJT? I find that I keep second guessing myself, especially when the problem is not exactly medical based. GMT guidance to a good doctor, just have a Google of that. It doesn't just talk about medical scenarios, but just generally what it means to act professionally. And when you're getting questions wrong, make sure you really look into why it's not like a certain answer over another, because that's what helped improve my scores as well. But the GMT guidance to a good doctor really helps. How did you find writing personal statements? I quite enjoyed it. I think it's the easiest part of my writing, apart from the introduction. Apart from, yeah, I think that's probably the easiest part of my application. I quite enjoyed that process. What about you, Catherine?
I enjoyed my personal statement apart from writing the introduction and conclusion. Everything in the middle was really good, actually. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, especially because a lot of you will have lots of work experience, lots of exciting things that you've done to talk about. So it's a really fun experience to sort of show them why you want to be a doctor and why you want to do medicine. The intro is obviously hard because it's you might have a bit of a mind block, but you can get it out of yourself just by like writing loads of bullet points and then turning them into sentences. So yeah, it's quite an enjoyable process. How do you manage A levels with interviews and BMAT? Is it just me or does everyone else find it all right? No, it is difficult. I think it's a lot about sort of like making sure you timetable things properly and you allocate sort of time to each of those things. Obviously, A levels should be your main priority, and then interview practice, you can just do that sort of weekly with friends, family, or you can attend courses or whatever it is you need to do. And the same with BMAT. BMAT, I think, is easier to study with A levels because it is sort of GCSE A level content anyway, compared to UCAT, which is quite a bit different to what you've been exposed to before in school. How much books do we need to read about medicine? I'm going to be completely honest. I didn't read any books. I mean, I did read some research articles which was relevant to the stuff that I had done in year 11, like as part of my work experience. But I don't really like reading a lot of nonfiction books or medical based books, so I just didn't have any of that. But I made up for it with my work experiences and other things that I'd done. So I don't think you have to have a book. What about you, Catherine?
So I read Do No Harm, but I think the year I was applying, probably 99% of people read Do No Harm. So I probably didn't make myself stand out by putting that in my personal statement. But I don't think you need to have to have read a book about medicine. You can just do articles or like it doesn't necessarily need to be about medicine. It can be about science or anything really.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I think we'll do these last two questions and then we'll wrap it up. Is that okay?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
of more coming in. Okay, we'll answer the last 4 and then we'll wrap up. So how do you prioritize what to put in your personal statement? Can you bank on them asking at interviews and not expand fully in your personal statement? Yeah, so you've only got 4,000 characters, so you need to pick the best experiences that show why you want to do medicine or what's inspired you to do medicine. A really good technique to do this is create a table of what you're going to put in your body paragraphs, and what you need to do is sort of on the first column have this have the example from your work experience. Then the second column have the skills that you observed from this example, and then in the next column you need to sort of say, do the reflection bit of why the skill is important in medicine, so relate it back, or do all of these in bullet points. And then the last column, you just need to say how you have these skills yourself, so use your own examples of where you've built these skills. So if you have that, you've basically just sort of planned out your entire personal statement body paragraphs, so that can really help. Then you can go back and sort of highlight them, which ones you definitely feel most confident talking about, which ones you maybe want to just leave for the interview, and you don't particularly think it sort of shows your strongest aspects for the personal statement. You can just leave that to interview. So just do a table and work through that. What did you do for work experience? So mine was a mix. I did 1 week in GP, 1 week in hospital in obs and gynae, because that was what I could find at the time. And then I had done like volunteering over year 10 and year 11 as part of my DAV. So I just talked about that as well, volunteering in a care home. So those were my main ones. And then, yeah, I think that was it. What about you, Catherine?
I did a couple of days in GP, a couple of days in hospital, and then I went on holiday with my family and did like 3 days in Nigeria. So that was my work experience.
Yeah, so I think it's a variety of different things that people have, but it's more about what you got out of it rather than like where you did it. So just saying like, oh, I went somewhere else and I did this, or like I did something in A&E. It's great, but it's more about your reflection of what you learned from those experiences. I think that's what's more important. How much do you think is necessary? I mean, you need enough to talk about in your personal statement, so a good variety of experiences is good, or you should have seen, a variety of different patients that you can talk about and reflect on in your personal statement and interviews. Are documentaries good to talk about in interviews? I'm not sure. I didn't really talk about them. I'm not sure. What about you, Catherine?
I didn't talk about documentaries either, sorry.
Yeah. So I'm not really sure about that, but I think it's always better to have personalized examples from your work experience rather than documentaries, which obviously loads of other people could have seen. So I think unless you have sort of a really good reflective bit on it, I would stick with personal experiences rather than sort of general topics. Do you have any tips for interviews? So this last question we'll answer. I think just be confident. If you've got to the interview stage, they probably already really like your application. They really like you. They just want to see who you are as a person and whether you fit in with the values of their medical school, and if you would work well with their medical school. That's what they want to see. So with that university, wherever you get the interview, make sure you've researched the university properly, because they'll always ask you about your knowledge of their medical school and why you want to go there. And some other common questions you can prepare for is like, why medicine? What skills do you have? What skills are needed to be a good doctor? Ethical scenarios. Obviously right now the focus would be on UCAT, but closer to the time of interviews, just make sure you have a look at the ethics. Again, the guidance to a good doctor can come in handy there as well. Do you have anything else to add, Catherine?
I think for interviews, be yourself. I think a lot of people tend to change during interviews and try and be someone they're not.
Yeah.
And they just want to know you, so just be yourself.
Yeah, that's really important as well. But yeah, hopefully that you guys found this session useful. And yeah, I didn't have anything else to cover. Did you want to say anything else, Catherine?
No, it's all good, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we'll end it there, but thanks everyone for being really interactive as well. And hopefully we'll see you in the next 6-month surgery session or something if we're running them. Yeah.
Right, see you later, everybody.